Welcome to Living in Between Worlds, where we come together. We are first and second generation immigrants and diasporas of the world coming together to share our lived experience. This is a space where we can kind of talk about different topics of our lives and be able to share, feel seen, feel heard, and feel loved in a really beautiful space. You'll find there's just so much beauty that comes out of these conversations. And every 2 weeks, we come here to talk about, we pick a topic and we just kind of share our experiences. And we invite you to join us as well for our biweekly meetups, which happens on Saturday. The next one is going to be on June 4th on a Saturday at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. And that's where we kind of take this topic and we kind of dive in deeper in a discussion format with a small, intimate group. There's always so much profound kind of insights that come through these talks. I always walk away learning so much from them. And today we have the topic of lies and the truth about lies. And Nuria had chosen this topic. So she's going to be kind of guiding our discussion today. But I want to introduce Nuria, and Sonia is here with me today, and we're just going to open up the dialogue. If you are here joining us live or on the replay, let us know you're here. And if anything resonates with you, if you have any questions, or if you have anything that you'd like to share with us, please share with us in the comments. We invite you again to join us in our meetup to kind of expand and extend this conversation. So hello, Nuria. Hello, Sonia.
Good morning.
Welcome.
Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. And we're going to talk about lots of lies. And you always make like this incredible introduction, Vanessa. So like the topic came up because I was literally gossiping with someone, right? Like about a third party. Like, what do you think? Do you think he's lying or she's lying? And I was like, wow, this is fascinating. Like, fascinating. How many times a day my perception, judgment, or point of view about something is based on someone else's lies or on my own lie.
Mm-hmm.
So I was panicking, like I was in the gossiping conversation, and at the same time I was like, so how many lies rest in a true?
Yeah.
So what if all what I've been building up in my life, it's a lie? So I was really confronted, right? And also I was trying, like to write down a little bit of an intro of this topic, and I couldn't. I just came up with, because there are so many branches around this topic, that I just came up with this: is lying a skill, a tool, a choice? What is it, right? And I would like to I can recall 2 remarkable lies in my life, but before I jump on that, I would like to open the floor to you guys to say, if you're comfortable with it, well, I've lied, and how frequently you lie. And then we can dig on, is a skill, is a tool, is a necessity, it's a a helmet. What is it? Whoever wants to jump on.
I can start first. I think this topic, we can go like existential, or like, very much kind of like day-to-day talk about lies, or we can talk about like, what is the actual truth about this world, right? Like, But if we're talking about kind of an example, I find, you know, and I want to open this up to kind of really have so much compassion and grace for all of us, to be so open about and be so truthful about our lies, because that's the thing. It's been kind of in my experience, it's been kind of a protective mechanism for me, in the past, where if I lie about something, then I am shielding. I'm creating a kind of an illusion for this other person to see me in a certain way, and that's actually going to protect me in that sense, right? So, and I think we've talked about a lot about in previous discussions, you know, this aspect of, you know, I'm Chinese Canadian, and being born into kind of this culture where you are here to be a hard worker, you are here to succeed, and you like, it's all about status, it's all about success, it's all about kind of what you can bring to the table, what kind of value can you offer into this world, and you've got to like make something of yourself. And so I find anytime that I like am a little bit more conscious of my lies is when it has to do with showing people that I'm successful, right? Like, most recently, an experience that I had was, so my coaching school, we have a forum where that's meant for actually, they call it an Asian affinity group. And so anyways, we were asked who made 100K, and they wanted to list everybody to kind of in the group of who would make 100K. And I so wanted to lie about it. I was like, I was at 96K. So could that be actually, could I tweak it? Could I actually, you know, round it up? And that's considered 100K. So I could notice my brain wanting to be like, I want to be on this list. I want to be like seen in this way. Right. And so it's so interesting because I could kind of think back to different aspects of like, you know, when I share with a peer or something like, about my life, it's kind of like, well, here, everything is amazing, you know, like I could kind of butter everything up. And that's where the lies show up for me. It's like, I want to paint a beautiful picture for people to see me as like this being who has it all together. Right. And so that's usually kind of where it shows up. And I see it as like a way of like, oh, I can't let people see me. And even in coaching, like in sharing my journey, it's like, do I only show the transformations, or do I actually show like when I'm like super depressed and I can't, and I'm overwhelmed and I'm feeling frustrated, right? Like they can't see that part of me. So I find that I have that kind of internal struggle and that's usually how it shows up for me, is like when I want to kind of show that I'm this person, this vision of this being who has it all together. And the truth is I don't have it all together. Right. And so it's very humbling at the same time of like being able to share this truth, to be able to kind of like share that this is like, I can see how my mind just uses it as a way to protect me. And then I can choose again in that moment. Okay, I know that this is just me trying to prove something. And then dialing myself back to, okay, my truth is I don't actually have to prove anything. I don't have to show up in a certain way, like I'm enough kind of thing. Right. And kind of bringing myself back to that. But that's an example of where I find myself sharing my lies.
Sonia, sharing my lies.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks for sharing. Thanks for especially those like Someone's here. No one's here, it's just me. I think definitely I love this topic because definitely what really came up to mind was what you just mentioned, Vanessa, like the idea of like lying as a protective mechanism. I think it's definitely a tool that some people use either consciously or unconsciously as a way to, I would say, like protect your ego, either from like a perceived danger of like, you know, someone being upset with you or something. I mean, it's like when we like people please, when you're like, oh yeah, your food's delicious, and you're like, oh my God, it's too salty or this or that. It's a protective mechanism to kind of, I don't know, we're like human, we're like relational beings, and we really want to, you know, be part of the tribe, and we want to have friends, and you know, we don't want to be ostracized. So I think lying serves that kind of purpose of like connecting with others, in a way. Of course, you know, in like the realm of lying, there's like, I think there's like a spectrum of lying, right? You have like things that, you know, might be more inconsequential maybe, or the things that, you know, some people just do them, but they don't create like that rift in your identity where you're like, oh my God, it's like I'm living, you know, against my values because, you know, I told my mom that her dish was really good, but secretly I thought it was kind of like too salty. I mean, I think there's like it's a spectrum. There's definitely a point in which if you live too much your life with this kind of like the split between like what you're really thinking or how you're really feeling versus what you're projecting, of course there's a point where it kind of like, you know, leads to a bit of an existential crisis because you're like, okay, I have to like drop the facade here, right? um so but I think in those circumstances, so let's say lying in terms of like people pleasing and things like that, I think for me it serves like that purpose of like bonding with other humans, um being included, feeling safe, feeling like, you know, you're connected, you're on the same vibe. But I also think sometimes lying can be a tool that we use as a way to almost simplify the reality in a way, because I was thinking of like your example, Vanessa, when you say like, okay, when someone asks me like how you're doing, like usually we reply with kind of like a short version of it, because I mean, depending on what's the kind of relationship and the kind of forum that you have, I mean, the relationship you have with the person or in which kind of forum you're participating, the nuances of your life might be more, you know, understood and accepted and welcome, versus with like, you know, acquaintances in the street or like clients of yours that are more like kind of far away from you, that like, you know, you may not feel like telling them that you're like, oh shit, I just got into a fight with my partner, or like just I just went to visit a relative that's very sick, and you know, and you don't feel like, you know, sharing all the nuance, so you just answer for simplicity, okay, it's fine, as in I'm not currently like dying, I don't need any like emergency care or anything. You're just like, oh yeah, no, I'm fine, all is good. And so lying as a way to simplify or to shortcut reality that it's often complex, I think that's another kind of purpose of lying. So connection and simplification of like um, complex realities, I think those would be the two kind of main ways. I definitely like when I think of like my own kind of lies, one like really funny thing I have, like a habit that I just like um that I just thought of. It's like for some reason when it comes to like maybe like numbers or things like that, like for some reason I'm gonna like try to like exaggerate it a little bit just for kind of like dramatic effect. Like, oh yeah, they saved like a whole bunch of money. Like, yeah, she said like $1,000, and it was probably like they said like 700, and I was like, yeah, no, they were like saving like like 1,000 or something. I just like rounded up to, I mean, when I think about it, I'm like, it's a mix of like simplicity, kind of like being like, just round that up. I could just round it down too. And in some circumstances, I might just round it down. But there's also like that, maybe like persuasion effect, or just like a tool to like try to get your story to be more noticeable. I don't know. There's like that social element of, I don't know, trying to like impact the other or like shock them and kind of get a reaction from them. So it can also be like almost like a humorous tool too. But again, once again, we're going like lying. It's like a spectrum. On one end, some lies are more inconsequential, and other lies are like soul crushing kind of thing. So, but it's such an amazing topic. It's, I mean, an interesting and complex topic.
It is. It is, Sonia, what you said is like, it's amazing, because it's like, how can we make the reality like softer, right? Where there is no big damage, when in fact lies can escalate, and like this is snowball that at a certain point you cannot stop. And I was thinking, like, in my own experience, all the times I've lied, that have been many, because when I recall them, I was like, like this was tiny, yeah, but it counts, right? So I was thinking, okay, did I learn how to lie? So I was just, digging. So, well, what was my starting point? And I remember that my mom told me that my father passed away. That was her version of the story. She simplified reality, right? Like at that time, like late 70s, being a single parent was like, no, it's not gonna happen, right? So she was making so many judgments about herself that the easiest way to smooth that reality was with a lie. Like, who's gonna find out, right? Like, come on, who's gonna find out? No, your dad passed away. So I was born with that idea. And then later on, but there was something in me that was like, this doesn't sound like true to me, right? Like, or let's say that he passed away, why there is no pictures of him? And I remember that I was, I don't know, probably 8. And I asked my mom, I have a question. When people pass away, their images from pictures disappear? And my mom, what? Yes, because, I've seen pictures of you before I was born, and in all of them, you're alone. So I don't know if when my father passed away, he just disappears from the picture. And my mom was like, oh, well, but, well, this is true. I was 8, okay? The truth is that your dad was married and he didn't want to form a relationship. So when I told him that I was pregnant, he told me he was married. So I was 8, right? So I was about like, pass me the cigarettes because this is too much. So anyways, of course, my mom had this, baggage that, how can I deal with this, right? Like she was like this virgin that suddenly got me pregnant. So I remember that later on, my grandma washed this beautiful sweater that she didn't want to put it on the dryer. So she extended the sweater on top of a towel. So I went to ride my bike and I was this perfect little girl. Like that was right after my mom told me the truth. So I came from riding my bike and I was running and I went into my house and I stepped on the sweater. So my print was there, my footprint was there. And I was like, I'm going to disappear from here. And my grandma was like, who did this? Ah, my sweater. Blah. She was crazy. So like, I'm the perfect girl. I'm going to lie. It wasn't me. And she's going to believe me because I'm a perfect girl. So I said, it was my cousin and he was the black sheep. So of course it was expected. So she was like crazy. And my cousin was like, I promise, I swear to God, I didn't step on the sweater. And I didn't say a word. And I got away with. So later on, I was like, okay. So you can survive lying, right? And then, like at that time, if you came from a dysfunctional family that were not dad and mom, you were the weirdo. And I was the weirdo for the last years of my life. So I was like, I don't like to be a weirdo anymore. People are asking me about my father, and in Father's Day, the Father's Day festival, my father never show up, and my uncle and my grandpa come here, and it was nice, but they are not my parents, and it's uncomfortable, and I don't know what to say. So I lied. So I said that my father passed away in a plane crash accident. So the magnitude was crazy, right? So people started like, oh, so no more questions were asked to me. And I received like this, a little bit of belonging, like the sense of belonging, because I was the poor girl who lost her dad. So like now when I think about that, it's just crazy to me to say in which moment I came up with all of that. Like, of course, I have this incredible imagination, right? But it's I don't know if the system push you, if you learn from the system, if it's if it's more comfortable to be around the strangers, and then you can be more honest, because at the end they don't know you, and you give yourself the permission to lie to people that matter to you, to keep things, in peace and in calm, and everybody's comfortable with what is not true. But later on we have this phrase in Spanish, I don't know in English you use it, like it's better to hurt with a truth than destroy with a lie. But sometimes the truth destroys people. Like, am I willing to receive all the truth in the world? Probably not. Or how many times I ask for one specific version of something, but hoping that I get a lie. And later in the life, of course, my father was alive and kicking. I met him later on the road, and he was a professional liar. He was professional, like seriously. I don't know if I studied communications to learn like non-verbal messages, right? But the first time I saw him, I was like, you're full of shit, dude. But I was like, wow, did he learn this from my grandparents? And now that I'm a newcomer, as an immigrant, do I lie to fit? Like, what is the, this slippery slope where my lie is to survive, or my lie is to fit, to belong, to, it's better to lie, it's more comfortable to lie. I don't know. Those are the thoughts that came up after I was reviewing my lying milestone.
That is so fascinating, and thank you for sharing that story. I think you brought up so many interesting points, because I think generationally speaking, I think this mechanism, this tool, or this skill of lying, I think intergenerationally speaking, it has probably been passed around in part due to the belief or like, yeah, the belief that like, you know, I mean, I'm trying kind of like just to like be like, let's say like in your mom's shoes when you were like 8 or something. I'm thinking she probably had some version of the belief that you wouldn't be able to handle the truth as a child for a while. And then, you know, at some point when like you ask that like kind of like reality shattering question, which is very legitimate, by the way, in like the head of like an 8-year-old child being like, oh, people must just like disappear. And yeah, after you get the truth, you're like, oh my God, I need to go. But like, so, but like that idea that like we either we don't we're afraid that like, let's say like children might not be able to handle the truth, so it's kind of like this whole thing of like, well, you know, we're just gonna create a version of a story. And you know, people use like different, especially like I find with death, or like you said, like separations, like I think as humans we have like a lot of difficulty talking about these things, and they're kind of like similar because, you know, we could say that like you know, it's like an end of something, right? And it has to do with real death, because like I'm sure, like pretty sure, like in my family too, when we were younger, I'm trying to think, when my grandma died, I do remember I was told the truth, but definitely like they kept some details kind of like change so that I wouldn't know. And then like with time I knew more of, you know, how exactly happened, blah, blah, blah. But there's always like this underlying belief that like, I'm gonna lie because I'm afraid that the other person won't be able to handle it. But many times I also find that that is, maybe not in all instances, but a lot of the times it's also like a projection that people do. Because like, I mean, if we go back to kind of like, why do people lie, we could also kind of reframe it as a hiding of certain parts of yourself or of your story, of your reality. And so it's almost like there's that shame involved. And if you have that shame and you have that kind of like unprocessed feeling about something that you haven't been able to like digest and like process, make peace with, because you have not yet done that, you don't believe that anyone else can handle it. You're kind of like, I cannot handle this truth, so certainly someone else will not be able to handle it, let alone like a child, because, you know, we sometimes tend to like underestimate children's capacities to understand things. So it's like, okay, I cannot handle this, I have to kind of feed you a story too. And it's kind of like the person comes clean with their lying once they have been able to kind of process that and kind of like see it in the eye kind of thing. But yeah, it's fascinating of this whole, I mean, the reflection I keep having, it's like how many lies have been passed like intergenerationally because of kind of like this belief that like, oh, children might not be able to handle that. Or the same applies when it's like abuelita is too old to handle the truth, and they do the same thing but like with another older person kind of thing. And it's just so anyway, it's like they're too young to handle the truth, or it's like she might have like a heart attack if we tell them the truth. So yeah, there's like that intergenerational aspect of not believing in another person, a capacity to handle something, and oftentimes it being a projection of our own inability to handle something. But that was a really fascinating story.
Yeah, I love to hear Vanessa's comments now, because I'm sure that she already like and but before that, I just want to say that also there are so many lies that are socially accepted and expected, right? Like if you want to go back to work after having a baby, like you cannot say that you had a baby. You have to come up with something to justify your maternity leave. It's crazy. Or if you were unemployed, it's like, how can I cover up that gap? And there are also workshops to lie about that. You know, you don't word it as you were unemployed. You word it as you were studying a course. You like, it's socially expected that you lie, right? So it's, yeah. So Vanessa, it's.
Yeah, the whole thing about white lies, right? It's like, it's a continuation of what Sonia was talking about, how it's like just this perception that the other person can't handle it. So it's like, or like in terms of like, oh, I'm going to have this white lie in order to protect the other person. It's not just to protect me. Now it's protecting the other person so that the other person doesn't get harmed. Right. And thinking, and I think this is like, you know, for me, it really comes back down to fear, right? Like anytime that I lie, it's coming out of fear. And the fear is usually a perception of what another person will think. And so I will lie in order to kind of like change their mind, right? Because but the thing is, I don't actually know what they're actually thinking, but I'm, like Sonia said, it's a projection. Like I have this thought of like, oh, if I was in their shoe, this is how I would respond. So this is what I'm going to tell them now in order for them not to have that response. Right. So there's a lot of like, our mind is very smart in that way. It will like do all the little calculations and like create a formula that supposedly works. Right. And I think it comes back to your point, Nuria, about how like when we've tested something, we've had the experience where, okay, it actually works. Like in this scenario, I lied about this and I didn't harm anybody. And I came out all right, right? Like, oh, you know, my cousin's the black sheep. So it's like, that's not going to change anything. They're going to stay the black sheep, right? So like, there's no harm in it, right? So it's like, so that's where I think it's coming back to like really honoring yourself, and like there's fear of telling the truth, because when you tell the truth, then there's that fear of like, oh, I'm going to harm somebody else if I tell the truth, or if I'm going to harm, or I'm going to make it more difficult for myself. So there's a discomfort aspect. It's either I'm going to be uncomfortable or the other person's going to be uncomfortable. Right. And so like, yeah, I find that it really comes back down to like knowing your truth and knowing whether you can actually handle the truth. And because a lot of times we've already created a whole scenario where it's like, oh, if I tell the truth here, that means I'm going to have to change my job, or I'm going to have to break up with this person. I'm going to have a hard conversation, right? Like, so we're doing all of this. It's that simplicity aspect, right? I'm just going to simplify it so that I don't have to do all those things that my mind has already created. The scenario, the story, I don't want that story. So I'm just going to like make it easier right now and just like tell a little white lie, and then I can let it go. Right. So, and I think like that training, it's subconscious, right? Like the more we see that, oh, it's okay, the more the brain's just going to default to like, oh, we've done it before and it worked out, so it's fine. Right. But then in our society as well, like we get condemned for lying as well, right? Like we get shamed for lying as well. So there's that aspect of like, okay, I'm doing this to protect myself, but at the same time, or protect this other person, but at the same time, I'm going to feel like shit after for lying, right? I'm going to beat myself up for doing that. So it's kind of like this, for me, it ends up being like a really endless cycle. And I mean, maybe I'll share this later, but like, I remember being the person consecutively, like in different friendships, being lied to. Like I had a friendship where someone basically, like you had mentioned, Nuria, like once you start lying, it kind of like just keeps, it's like a snowball, snowball effect. It just keeps adding. Like I was in a friendship for like, probably for about 3 years, this person had lied to me about all their love relationships. And it just kind of blew my mind when it all kind of came to shit. But like every story she would tell me just worked. And it didn't harm me during that time. But at the end, it was just like, okay, holy crap, like everything I believed about this person was like all a lie. So how do I even move forward? How do I even like trust in somebody else? So this is where like it ends up kind of for me playing, like it messes with my own self-trust. It messes up with like my ability to trust myself to believe in what's truth and what's lie, right? And so there's this cycle about it, but I think it's all part of the human experience. And I think this is where like it all helps us to kind of start to question. When we start to question things, it brings us back to kind of knowing ourselves and getting back to like being really honest with yourself, right? So yeah, that's kind of what came up when both of you had shared.
And something that came up from your sharing, I was thinking like, because you said like our brains are like brilliant, right? To come up with something, with some, path to say, okay, this is the plan for the lie, right? And it doesn't stop there. We also enroll people, like, right? Like when Sonia was saying, like, don't say, abuelita, that person screwed up because she's gonna get a heart attack, and all the families like on board of, yes, we all can lie here, right? So the lie become true because we all are together in this, right? And then so that piece of the enrollment is crazy to me. And at the same time, I was thinking like how strong a relationship can be to support a lie to survive. So does a relationship, I don't know, like probably relationships are not strong enough to support the truth, for a long period of time? Or what is in the way, right? To say, let's talk straight here, right? And stay and still stay. And I remember I had a friend of mine used to say, don't tell me a secret, because at the moment you tell me a secret, first off, I want to tell you that I'm going to share the secret, and secondly, it won't be longer a secret. So please don't tell me secrets, because I don't want you to put me on the spot of being a liar. I don't want to be a liar. So put it together and deal with your secret. And so there is like a sort of release, right? Like when you share your lies to someone else is oof. But I want to ask you guys, what happens on the other way around when we know for a fact that someone else is lying to us? Do you come up with another lie? Do you step back? Or do you say, I'm going to find out and I'm going to show you that over my dead body that you're lying? Because in my end, there is a sort of pleasure when I unleash. It happens with my daughters all the time. Like, where did you say that the sock was? Like, where did you say that? From that to something massive and really harsh, like with my ex husband, I became an expert finding out. So he was lying to me because I became an expert on being, like pushing that you're lying to me, you're lying. And he wasn't, but I was so obsessed of finding out that probably I pushed him to lie. So it could go in one way or the other way, right? So I don't know what has been your experience in unleashing others' lies, truth.
I can definitely I mean, I think like with any of this like big philosophical conversations we have, of course, there's like no one method of like what to do if you suspect or you know with certainty that someone's lying to you, because I think the situation has to be assessed as to like it has to be assessed as to like what's the magnitude of the thing. I mean, at some point too, it's this whole idea of like we live in a complex world. At some point, you know, if we get super micro with every little thing, like you said, I mean, as someone with like generalized anxiety and OCD with my life, I can definitely see how this obsession with like what's the truth, what's real, what's not real, what's a lie, blah blah blah, it can lead you to almost like become kind of like either paranoid or become too obsessed with like trying to find like certainty or trying to find like the reality, blah blah blah, when in fact I think that and the answer that's like a lot less sexy and palatable is that human beings are very complex, and you know, some, you know, maybe one day you really found that soup that your mom made really salty, but then the other day it had like very similar amount of salt, but that day you kind of liked it. So which one is the truth, which one is not? It's like it becomes like we're a lot more complex than we think, and it's like it's not like a straight up answer where it's like we just plug things into an equation and it's like we can find out who's lying and to what extent or not. But of course there are situations in life where like, you know, you can clearly kind of like sense the other person like being very avoidant, or you can really like literally have seen them, you know, doing something, and then some people get to that level of like denial that's, you know, almost like pathological in that sense. And we do see that. We do see a lot of people in today's world living in completely parallel realities, and people having beliefs that are very, very, you know, different, and we're all kind of like trying to coexist together in here. And I think for me it would really be about, yeah, I mean, assessing the kind of like relationship that you have with this person. You know, realize, I mean, I'm just like thinking another example of like, you know, people lying, or not necessarily lying, but let's say if you encounter someone that's really, let's say, has a set of beliefs that's very different from yours. I don't know, they believe like in flat earth or something like that, and it's like, and you know that they believe in that and you don't, and it's like, okay, so how do you make peace with that? For me it's really about like assessing the relationship, assessing the things that really matter to you. You know, I don't know, knowing your boundaries, knowing like what's something that's like, okay, a big no, or what's, I don't know, it's like this whole idea of like choosing your battles in life. And you know, asking yourself, you know, is this something that I can tolerate? Is this something that it's really like a kind of transgression of a value for me, and you know, I need to reassess my relationship with this person, or like remove myself from completely from the relationship, like in Vanessa's case, you know, when you realize that you had kind of this friendship with someone, I can that someone that who was lying, I can definitely see how that's like super destabilizing even as an adult, because you know, if I don't know, it turns out I'm like, hey guys, I didn't tell you, but it turns out that I don't know, I'm an astronaut and a surgeon, and I have, you know, something like that, and you're like, you never told us about this, like, but it's like I can see how it's destabilizing, because you're like, well, like what aspects do we not know about this person, and what else, you know, it can be very, very destabilizing, I find. And it's totally, I mean, acceptable. As adults, we have the choice to, you know, choose how we want to live our life, how we want to spend our time, with whom, and so on. So I think it's definitely up to us to know. But one thing that I do wanted to say is that I think that lies will always kind of crumble with time, in the sense that, and that I am kind of grateful that like our body has that mechanism, in that at some point, if you're really living a lie, like you're kind of gonna know because like, I don't know, your emotional system will let you know. And I can even sense it, like there's definitely sometimes when like I have a lot of I have less practice like expressing anger for me, and I can go sometimes like days kind of processing anger and not knowing how to like verbalize it. And you could say I'm like lying for a couple of days because I'm kind of like but then at some point it's like the emotional guidance system in your body lets you know that you're like, okay, we need to find a way to express this. And oftentimes I have to write down my thoughts, I have to like process that, and then I communicate it to like the other party or something, or sometimes just writing them by myself helps me process that. But I think lies crumble with time, and you will at some point it becomes too energy expending. It's too high energy to keep up with like all the facades and all like the stories. It's so, I mean, sooner or later it's like we shall know the truth. So like it's coming one way or the other. So
Yeah. And I think for me was like that pleasure of finding the truth behind the lie was more about getting the validation of I was right. So it provides a sort of superiority, right? And I remember in one argument, my ex-husband told me, okay, yes, you are so impeccable. So I was like, well, I won, right? Like it was like, yes, I won. But the label of being impeccable was way even worse to me, to be labeled like that, than keeping the lie. Because something that is impeccable for me is like, it's untouchable, unbreakable. There's no way to be vulnerable there, right? So I learned a lot from there. But Vanessa, I'm gonna pass it along to you to wrap up, because as usual, we need another episode of this.
Yeah, we do. It just went by so quick. I was like, oh man.
Liar.
Yeah. But I want to like touch on also like the aspect of like, I just completely lost my thought.
Liar.
It's all good, because now I'm going into I do want to talk about like how like just kind of going back to where it all started. I think there's this aspect of we are creative beings, and there, as children, we have wild imagination, right? And so there is this kind of sense of like, oh, can I allow this imagination to continue into my adult life? Right. And and I guess this is where authors are born, because then they channel that energy into writing books or movies, right? That's where it gets channeled into. And I think this is where like sometimes as an outlet for day-to-day people who aren't creating movies or books, right? To have that channel to in their imagination, this is where their life turns into this kind of aspect of a backdrop for their imagination to run wild, right? Because and then coming back to kind of my example of like being deceived in that aspect, it's like, I don't know if I think I had learned so much from that experience that like, to Sonia's point, it's just takes so much energy that for me, I don't even need to know the truth of, to kind of expose this person, because it's like, okay, the lie is out. I don't need any more details. I don't need to kind of like, it's just, I'm done with it. Like, I'm just, it's a lie. I don't want to spend more energy on this. Right. So I find that I'm able to kind of like move on pretty quickly from it, just because of like, I just don't want to spend energy on it. And I think, just thinking about the imagination piece, I think this is where I can bring in for myself, like I can bring in compassion for the other person, that maybe they just needed a channel to a way to channel that imagination. And yeah, at that moment I was victim to it, but I don't have to be victim to it now. Like, I can kind of move on from that. But yes, let's continue this conversation, like in not this Saturday, but the following Saturday. We'll have a meetup to just kind of expand in this. And I think even just from our talk today, there's so much more that we can expand it to and into that discussion, right? So this is why we have these live calls, and then we go into our sharing circle. So we invite you to come out and just share your experiences, kind of. I find it's so healing when we kind of hear, as you can tell, that we all have different perspectives. We all have different experiences, and just being able to hear everybody's experience and their different ways to approach a topic, just kind of, I always walk away from these conversations with more things to kind of like unravel, right? And in that sense, we're kind of unraveling our own truth, right? What is true for us, right? And I think it's beautiful how we can be examples of all of that. So I invite you to come out June 4th, 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. The links are in the description, and we look forward to seeing you there. Thank you, ladies, for opening your heart and sharing, and just love these
lying.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, dear. Okay.